Honourable Member for St. John South, Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We live in uncertain financial times. The economies of individual countries of the European Union, countries like Greece, Italy, Spain, are over their heads in debt, and it's getting worse. No one knows where or when the global financial hardship will end. The economy of our largest trading partner, the United States, is still mired in debt. The U.S. has yet to get back on its feet following the 2007 recession. Worries that Europe's crisis could worsen and spread are spooking investors and consumers. Here in Canada, our economy has fared better than most. But there's an undercurrent of unease, an undercurrent of nervousness, an undercurrent of fear. How will our economy weather the impending storm? That's the outstanding question. There is no answer, not yet. The Conservative Finance Minister has acknowledged that Canada's economy faces obvious risks from financial troubles in the United States and in Europe. When David Cameron, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, spoke to this House in September, he said that the problems in the Eurozone are now so big that they have begun to threaten the stability of the world economy. So here we are today, in these uncertain financial times. And the Conservative government's answer to these uncertain financial times is to gut the federal public service, throw more people in jail, download expenses to the provincial governments, and kill the Canadian Wheat Board. Now, I am not a prairie boy. I've never walked in fields of golden wheat. I don't know what it is to live on flat land as flat as the eye can see. I'm a bayman. That's what we call it back home. I'm a bayman from around the bay. I've lived all my life on rocky land that rolls to the sea. But there is a common thread between the prairies and the extreme east of this country, Newfoundland and Labrador. That common thread is common sense. My colleague, the NDP MP for Winnipeg Centre, has pointed out in this House on numerous occasions, and this is a point that has resonated with me and should resonate with all Canadians. His point was this: there has never been one shred of evidence, not one shred of evidence, that farmers will be better off without the Canadian Wheat Board. So how can the Conservative government, which bills itself as being such a great steward of the Canadian economy in these tough economic times, that will only get tougher, how can the Conservative government be so reckless as to turn the prairie farm economy on its head without even doing a cost-benefit analysis? How? I have a quote from Alan Orberg, a farmer and chair of the Canadian Wheat Board's Board of Directors. Quote, "This government has no plan. It has no analysis. It has not even consulted farmers. Its approach is based solely on a blind commitment to a soundbite phrase called marketing freedom. Yet here we are barreling ahead on a timeline that will rip apart a 75-year-old marketing system in a matter of months and hamper any potential success or organization. This government's reckless approach will throw Canada's grain industry into disarray. It will jeopardize a $5 billion export sector. It will shift money from the pockets of Canadian farmers into the hands of American corporations." End of quote. How can the Conservatives justify not carrying out a cost-benefit analysis? How can the Conservatives base their argument on the strength of a free market when prairie farmers freely voted to market wheat through the Canadian Wheat Board? On September the 12th, a majority of farmers voted in a plebiscite to keep the Wheat Board. A total of just over 38,000 farmers submitted mail-in ballots during the plebiscite for a participation rate of 56%. That 56% is on par with the turnout for the last 3 federal elections. 62% of respondents voted in favor of retaining the single desk for wheat. 62%. How can the Conservatives ignore those results? Easily enough, when you have a majority government. That majority government power is a breeding ground for arrogance. A growing arrogance that sees the Conservatives thinking they know better than Canadian farmers. That's not the case, Mr. Speaker. Not so, not a chance. What fishing and farming have most in common at this particular moment in our history is that they're both under direct attack by the Conservative government. In the prairies, the Conservatives are attacking the livelihood of farmers with their attempt to kill off the Canadian Wheat Board. On the west and the east coasts, the fisheries are their target, with ongoing moves to gut what's left of the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. What the Conservative government should realize, what the Conservative government must realize, is that their buddies on Bay Street cannot feed Canadian families. That's a simple fact of life. So I don't get it. I don't understand why the Conservatives have it in for Canada's primary producers, fishermen and farmers. Why? Who will benefit? Who will be threatened? At the same time that the federal Conservatives are attempting to kill off the Canadian Wheat Board, back home in my home province, the provincial government, the progressive Conservative government, is moving towards the creation of a marketing board for fish. So the federal Conservatives are killing off the Wheat Board, which markets and brands Canadian wheat and barley around the world, at the same time that the provincial PCs in Newfoundland and Labrador are attempting to create a similar type fish board to market and brand our seafood around the world. That makes no sense. If anything, it shows that there should be more study. It shows that there should be more investigation. It shows that there should be more review so that smart decisions are being made. The federal Conservatives are killing the Wheat Board while the provincial PCs in Newfoundland and Labrador are birthing a fish board. 2 governments, 2 different directions. So what do we know about the Canadian Wheat Board? We know that the board sells grain to more than 70 countries around the world. The board returns all profits to farmers, between $4 billion and $7 billion a year. We know that the Wheat Board does not set grain prices. Prices are established by global supply and demand factors. However, the Canadian Wheat Board's size and market power are used to help maximize, key word here, maximize grain prices. So it's logical to assume that in the absence of the Canadian Wheat Board, prices will not be maximized. They won't be maximized, as was the case with the Australian Wheat Board, whose monopoly was abolished in 2006. In 3 short years, Australia's 40,000 wheat farmers went from running their own grain marketing system, selling virtually all of Australia's wheat, 12% of world wheat production, worth about $5 billion, to being mere customers of Cargill's, one of the world's largest agribusiness corporations, which is privately owned by a company in the United States. Since 2006, the Australian Wheat Board's share of wheat sales has dropped from 100% to 23% nationally, with 25 companies in the market, all looking to make money on the spread between purchase and sale price. Make no mistake, people are still making money off Australian wheat, but it isn't so much the Australian farmer who's making the money as the new middleman, as the big corporations. I want to end my speech with this thought, which struck me today after I read the Globe and Mail. I read this: Stephen Harper's crime legislation that triggered...
Order. Just to remind the honourable member that he may not use the name of other members in his speech, and that he has about 20 seconds remaining in his time.
My apologies. the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's crime legislation that triggered last spring's election could pass through the Commons this week as it makes its way to becoming the law of the land, and Canadians still don't know how much it costs. We don't know how much it costs. How does that make sense? We don't know the cost to the Canadian economy of eliminating the Canadian Wheat Board. That is not good enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.